Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of our season 1 of our Ducks podcast. And we're absolutely thrilled to have you back. Thank you for joining us so far. Number 5, I can't believe we've already got to this point. It's absolutely fantastic. I feel like we've covered so many topics already. Today, we are having a tiny bit of a direction change because previously we've been focused on really heavily focused on children and how to do that, and that is what we want to do with Dreamweavers. We're focusing on children, but there is one element of children's lives that are incredibly important, more important than anything else, and that is their parents. So
Or
today,
caregivers.
or caregivers, yes,
Or
parents
caregivers.
or
Let's put that out there.
caregivers. Yeah. Have to make sure we say it right, but it's very true. You know, the adults in a child's life are their biggest influences, their biggest guides and guardians, and it's important that we look after them too. And today's episode is focused on parental anxiety. So whether that is you have a child who is anxious, neurodiverse, has anything at all that makes life slightly difficult for them, that can make you incredibly anxious. As the adult in a child's life, you are what they look to, and you are their safe space. And if you are anxious because you're worried about them, or if you have anxiety, if you are someone who has suffered from anxiety your whole life and now you're responsible for young people, you are going to want to give them the best sort of view on how things are. And that can be hard if you're having to mask from them, because as we said before, children are like sponges. Whether it's for energy or what they hear, they will take it all on board. So today's episode is to focus on how we deal with that, why we handle things the way we do, and how we can help and how you can look after yourselves. So yeah, Tracy, is there anything you want to say?
I'm going to dive straight into this one. I think
Fantastic.
it's a great way to flip our topic a little bit this week. And you're right, it's so important that everything that young people pick up comes from the adults around them. Role modeling is such a huge thing, and it's so underestimated and unexplored as a parent. Sometimes you don't want to think that you're their only influence. You know, sometimes I see myself in my boys now, they're 20 and 18, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly where that comes from. I was like, oh. And that in itself can be really anxiety inducing as a parent, because you're passing along so many things to them. And if you're self-aware that you struggle with anxiety, you don't want to pass that along to them. But the realism is they're soaking in everything. So unless you took the time to really work with your anxiety and fully understand it, you are passing along those habits that you don't even think about.
Yeah.
You know, and that can be such a stressful thought. And it can be a really disempowering thought as well, you know. And I know the last couple of years has been really tricky for my family, and my eldest's mental health really suffered. And watching him suffer through depression, that I know that when they were little, they saw me suffer through depression. And it's heartbreaking to think that I've passed that on. And I know that that's not all of that is. And I know that that wasn't necessarily the ins and outs of it. There was a lot behind it. But when you have suffered through depression and anxiety, you do worry that you're passing that on to your children.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
it's horrible. It's a horrible consideration. But my kind of thing that picks me up when I pass this on is also the amount of things I've passed on to them that empower them. You know, my boys are so much more confident than I ever was at that age. They are like the most open, confident human beings. And I'm like, holy cannoli, I don't know how that happened. And my youngest quite often will come out with sentences that are 100% coaching sentences. They are like, he will throw it straight back in my face. He will just ask me these questions. I'm like, whoa, that's so from me. And you know, that's the upside of it, as while they've suffered with their mental health difficulties the last year. The first thing he was 18 when he was really suffering, but the first thing he said is, Mum, can I get some help with this?
Oh, What
Oh
else can you wish for?
my goodness, I ignored my depression and anxiety for years. I didn't recognize it. I didn't know what it was. It filled my life, it overtook everything. And I had no idea that that wasn't just the way the world existed.
Oh
I,
yeah.
I just didn't. And to see him suffering for a very short amount of time, realistically, he'd only, it was a lot of things changed in his life very quickly, and he really struggled with it. And he did go very deeply into depression. It
Mhm.
was so worrying as a parent. But he also went, can I get help?
Amazing.
And that to me was everything. It
Yeah.
was, as a parent who is anxious that you've passed on those problems, it's that acknowledgement that you've also passed on, that it's okay and that you can get help with it.
100%.
That was the most amazing thing as a parent. It was in some of our darkest times, watching my son suffer, it was amazing and beautiful to watch him use the tools that he'd grown up with
Yeah.
to not suffer for the amount of time that I suffered for.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this is a great topic for us to kind of catch on to, because I think, we've both been there, we've both had those moments, and
Yeah.
it's definitely something that I feel a lot of people in this world struggle with, that they don't even necessarily recognize that they struggle with it. They think that that's just normal and everyday to live with that anxiety and not have a way out of it.
100%.
Mm.
Absolutely. And you do, I feel you also, when you are responsible for other human beings, you almost, it's very hard not to still keep your own mental health in the foreground, because you think everything has to come first, they have to come first, I have to come bottom of the pile. And it's the whole analogy of you can't pour for an empty cup, which is very true. You have to make sure you've looked after yourself, but you can't keep other people mentally, you know, healthy if you're coming from a very mentally unhealthy place. And like, I note it, it's very funny how I, like, when we went back to a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about passing on sort of the social anxiety and things like that, and how you are around people. Well, I noticed that, having been through situations where I was very gaslit for very long, and I became someone who apologizes at the drop of a hat, or apologize for the fact it's windy today. Like, it got to a point where it was my natural defense mechanism to say sorry.
Yeah.
And the people I'm around now, they absolutely think it's, I get told off a lot for saying sorry, which then tells me I then apologize for that. So it's a lovely cycle of sorry.
Never have I told you off for saying that. Nope, nope, nope.
No, but that's one thing I have picked up in my daughter. I will stub my toe walking into a room and she'll apologize. And I pick her up straight away. I'm like, why are you apologizing? Oh, I don't know. And it's because growing up, she heard me always apologizing for everything. And that's one thing we're actively working on at the moment. It's not because
Yeah.
she's scared. It's not because she thinks I'm going to react badly. It's nothing like that. It's a drilled in because she's heard it so long. And it hurts. As a parent, it does hurt, or as anyone who is responsible for any child, if you do something that you don't like and then you see them picking up on it, it's you have to learn. And it's forced me to try and look at it a bit more, because I've gone, she's picking up on it. I saw a really funny quote that I can't remember exactly what it was. It's basically a joke about, you don't realize how annoying you are as a person until you're trying to do it with an absolute replica of yourself. And it's and I do it, and there's certain things I'm like, that was me, she just spoke me back to me. And it's funny, it's sweet, but she's 12 and she is an overthinker, and I wonder where she gets that from. And
No idea.
I know, no idea, right? But again, it's learned behavior, and that's why at the moment we have daily conversations. I actively sit back and think, what did I need at her age? I needed someone to sit down with me and go, if you're feeling emotional, let's sit, let's chat. Don't go
Yeah.
hide away. And that's all I needed. But at that time, I thought I needed to hide because I didn't want to put it on anyone else. I didn't want to put the stress on my parents. I didn't want to give it to anyone else because in my mind, you know, people talk to me because they're worried. I don't want to, they're worried. So I'm not going to put my worries on them. And, you know, back then I thought, you know, that was the healthy thing to do. It is not.
No, it's really not.
It's not. And you end up being a grown up who struggles to talk about things, devalues their own emotions, and thinks that everyone else's problems come above your own. And it's not a good way of thinking. So we have daily, mainly when we're in the car, like we're a big karaoke family. We just will have music on and sing the whole time. But if we're not doing that, it will be the moment to just ask how she's feeling, if she's a bit sad, if she's got something on her mind, and we'll talk it out. And now I think I have maybe gone a bit too far because now she is so open. I'm like, darling, didn't need to know that. And but at the same time, I'm really glad about that because when she gets a little bit older and there's maybe issues that I would never dream of talking to my parents about, I think she'll be very open. And it's starting conversations and you know, broaching those slightly awkward, slightly weird. If you have a child, like say you are the adult to a teenager who maybe has been quite closed off for a long time, you can't just walk in and go, right, here's your emotions, come on, tell me. That's not going to work.
No, it takes time.
Yeah, but maybe try a little conversation, just a tiny one. Ask how their day's been. Ask, you know, if, you know, there's anything they need help with. I know from my own experience, as looking back to my teenage years, I was a very depressed teenager. I was a very isolated teenager. My safe space was my bedroom and I lived in there. I did everything. My way of focusing was to focus on my work. So I did very well in my exams because I did nothing else. And that's because, but that was my focus. I think it was just a hyper focus of I have control over this, so I can do it. And, you know, I used to just take my meals up there. I used to do stuff. And in hindsight, I personally wish my mum would have said, can you eat with us today? Or, you know, tell us about your day or whatever. But I lived up there and, you know, she obviously thought that's what I needed. And, you know, we have since, only very recently actually, since spoken about it. And she's gone, I think I should have done more. And, you know, it was different, you know, however many years, it's like 20 years ago. But it's funny though, I have this memory, I was in a real deep depression. I was really sad. I was really reclusive and I was deep in sort of GCSE coursework. And I remember, I think she must have seen how sad I was, but I was hiding it. And I remember she came into my room, she brought me a cup of tea and she brought me another lamp. It sounds really silly, but I used to have this, I was a very moody teenager, I had candles and all of that. But I had this little light on my desk and I was doing my really intricate graphic design coursework. And she came in and she brought me this really big lamp. And all she did was brought me a cup of tea, brought me this lamp, set it up, and then she left again. And in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm not invisible. Like she's noticed what I needed. And she's done, and that meant the world. And so as a parent, I'm trying to always look over what she's saying and try and say, what does she need right now? But it's hard, especially if you have a child who's reclusive or it's difficult. So try and see, you know, at that moment, I probably needed a massive hug, of 4 weeks worth of talking and all of that. But the physical thing I needed was a light to make it easier to work with and a cup of tea. And
I think it's part of that parent anxiety as well. As parents, we don't know when to step in. It's trying to judge when to step in is impossible. It is so hard.
Will it be too much?
Will it be too much? Will they brush it off? You know, especially I have 2 boys, and for a long time they were quite huggy when they were young, but once we hit about 11, that was it. Physical contact was like, no, God, no, mom, you know, and they did do the shut me out thing, and they hibernated in their rooms, and it wasn't that they were never welcome from a parent point of view, it's that I didn't know how to reach out to them. And
Yeah.
I did reach out to them. I used text message, reached out to them more often
Yeah.
than not. And they talk better in the car. And even now, if I go on a car ride with my boys, they'll both just spill everything. I'm like, I'm trying to drive. You're telling me this now? You know,
I got that.
told in cars. I'm
Or
telling
like
you,
2 a.m. Like, what is it?
always
Yeah.
2 a.m. What is it with 2 in the blinking morning? No, it's always either the middle of the night when you're asleep, and then the amount of times they've stood there and I've turned around and gone, oh,
Ah, what do you want?
and it's like, yeah, and then they just spew out like life-changing things. I'm like,
Huh?
what?
Yeah.
And it's never, I think with teenagers, the thing that I kind of learnt was to be open to however they want to communicate.
Yeah.
But open up different channels. So you offer the different channels. The amount of times I have spent texting, hey, it's 3 o'clock. Are you coming down for dinner? At 5? Because, you know, I'm giving them warning, because if I ask them at 5, I'd be like, no, I'm busy. But it's understanding that, you know, giving them different ways to communicate with me was really important. It was
absolutely
opening, you know, the car rides and being happy to turn the music off in the car and talk to them. Or, you know, my youngest, even now, he comes down at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he'll do something really silly, like he'll ask for food. He doesn't want food at all. He wants to chat, and he'll sit kind of in a chair in my room, and then he'll sit there for like 15 minutes just fiddling and fidgeting, and I'm like, count to 10. You know,
what do you want?
I'm trying to sleep. And then he'll come out with something really life-changing or really deep, or something he's really struggling with, but it takes him a long time to work it up, even now. And we've always had the conversations I've had with my boys. My mum would have had a traption if I'd have tried to have a quarter of those conversations with her.
Wow.
She wouldn't know what to do with them. They are the most open boys, because, you know, we've built up to that. You know, we had things like, we'd have table time when they were young. So when they were young teenagers, they could tell us anything about anything up this table, and there'd be no consequences.
Wow, I love that.
So it took away the reason to lie to us.
Yeah.
You know, if they were having a hard day, they could go, Mum, can we go sit at the table? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, we can do that. Just give me 10 minutes to finish this, and then we'll go sit up there. And as a parent, sometimes I wanted to really shout at things I heard at that table. But yeah, by having an open conversation, we could discuss the outcomes, the consequences, what they could learn from it. And realistically, them lying to me or them getting shouted at wasn't going to teach them anything.
No.
You know, they knew it was wrong. They already knew that. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother trying to hide it.
Yeah.
But having open spaces with them, nowadays we don't have that. Nowadays they just blurt out anything in the middle of nowhere. It's like there's no
You've created open adults
at all. I have quite often when I'm on the phone to people, they'll just blurt something out, and I'm like,
guys.
They normally, touch wood, they normally check who's on the other end of my phone first.
Nice.
Not always. But that's, you know, as a parent, it's really easy to get anxious over trying to open up that communication form.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the main reasons the teenagers especially won't be communicating with you is because they're anxious too. So having an open space to communicate, and having this open consequence, you know, not consequence free, I guess. If they'd done something illegal, they knew perfectly well that they were going down to a police station. You know, it's not consequence free totally, but it was a free space to talk without, no one's going to shout at them.
Yeah.
No one's
you might get
go, yeah, you might get me putting faces like, but you would never have got a shouting or we don't shout in our house. It was a rule we made when they were very little.
Yeah. I love that.
I just don't see the point. It's a waste of my energy to shout.
Yeah.
It doesn't teach them anything to shout. It's not that there are no consequences. There are consequences.
Yeah.
I only have to give my boys a certain look, and they'll be like,
Crumbs.
we don't need to shout and raise our voice. I didn't want to train them to shout at other people.
No.
I didn't want to teach them shouting was the right way forward in the world. I didn't want to be shouted at by them. So why would I shout at them?
So true.
I've gone completely off topic now.
No, not at all.
I'm like completely gone.
No, it's fine. I was gonna say that we're going back to communication methods, and if you are anxious or your child is anxious and you don't know how to open those doors of communication, sometimes the physical act of speaking is too much. And you used to deal with through like text. I have a friend who, her daughter was 13 and she started falling in with the wrong crowd, and my friend is the like daintiest, soft spoken, like she is this like, and this was completely out of her comfort zone because she was like the safest girl at school and all of this, and she didn't know how to deal with it, and her daughter would go straight to rage every time she tried to speak to her about it. So what she did is she just bought an empty notebook, and what she would do is she would write down a message for her daughter in it. And she would say, look, this notebook is always on this table. If you have something you want to tell me, talk to me. You don't have to do it face to face. We don't have to address it at all in person. You put it in this book, I will read it and I'll reply to you. And it took a while for her to put anything in it. She was like, stupid, I don't want to do that, blah, blah. Then something happened in the crowd she was in, something nasty happened. I can't remember what it was. And it was obviously playing on her mind. And my friend, she remembers it was about 3 a.m. She hears her daughter's door opening. She thought she was going to the toilet. She heard her going downstairs, had the light turn on, and she was obviously on the edge of the bed going, she's going out? What's she doing?
Yeah.
But she heard it. She didn't hear much, didn't hear the door or anything. Light went off, came back upstairs. She was like, did she get food? Whatever. And next day she went down, she checked, and she'd obviously, it played on her mind so much that she had Can you still see me?
You did glitch, but I can hear you and see you. It's fine.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fine. Sorry, there is a phone call coming in on my phone. So yeah, and she checked and she'd written in it, and after that it was almost daily conversations through this book. And then I think once they'd been doing it for quite a while, the daughter, she didn't want to suggest anything in person because the mum didn't want to push it too far. And then the daughter one day had said, would you like to go for a walk? She put it in the book, like, would you like to go for a walk after school tomorrow or something like that? And the mum had put, yeah, absolutely. So I don't think it really spoke about much on the walk, but that was how they started. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant because it's getting it out, but it's in the ether. It doesn't exist. And it's sort of, when you're younger, it's almost like secret messaging. But for her, it was the only way that she could communicate with her daughter. And then after that, they got a lot closer. She managed to pull her back on the right track. She realized that these weren't really friends. They were whatever. But it's terrifying. Like I homeschool my daughter, and I'm at the point where I'm like, I would like her to get more friends her own age, because she is cracking at dealing with adults and cracking at dealing with young kids. But I'm like, she's not, she almost hangs out with her friends when she goes to scouts. And sometimes I'm like, I feel like she's looking from an adult perspective. Like I'm like, she doesn't know the lingo. She doesn't know all of that stuff because she's not part of it. And I'm like, she needs to integrate a little bit more. But it's that fear of any parent that your child's going to come home going, this is my new friend. And you're looking at thinking, oh no. And that's anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
as it is.
There's just so many things, isn't there? There's so many things that can trigger anxiety as a parent. There's so many different ways. You don't know what's coming, and it's. I think the important thing is to focus on what you can control.
Yeah.
You know, the things like having open communication available. You can't force them to communicate with you, but you can open every blinking method you have available
Oh,
to
absolutely.
enable that communication. You know, you can write down all your anxious points and you can share them with your teenagers, especially.
Yeah.
You can tell them, I'm really anxious about this. How does that work? If they'll talk to you like that, if they're used to you talking like that, then that's, you know, like I said, my son is a mini coach. he's he's grown up
I
while
love
I've
it.
kind of been training and learning all the psychology things. So he was learning alongside me when I was kind of studying, which
Yeah.
is interesting when you have
Oh,
a
I know.
little, 18-year-old trying to tell you to think better.
Mm. But it's all about positive strategies. Like, as a person who, I was very anxious, and I probably, anxiety does take over a little bit too much sometimes. And then when you have a child who is also anxious, and I always assumed, I've said it before, I always assumed I'd be absolutely cracking at dealing with anxiety because I knew what I was dealing with. Absolutely not.
Mm.
Everyone's is so different. I had no clue how to help her. So it's strategies. Oh, hello,
You'll
Luna.
have to excuse us. We've got an invader.
That's fine. She's the third
Luna
host.
is my cockapoo. If you cannot see her, she has one blue eye and one brown, and she's very cute. And she likes to put her face right in front of mine, and you can't help but kiss her because she is just too cute. But she quite often ends up on Zoom. Um,
It
she
doesn't
probably
matter.
thinks this is a Zoom call, so she's like, "Let's join in."
She's our anxiety buster.
She's our anxiety buster. But no, pets are a really good anxiety buster because
Mm,
they just accept you how you are, and they'll create space for you. I'm really struggling to talk because I'm playing with the dog. Um,
absolutely fine. Well, as I was saying, it's all about techniques. So as you say, pets are really helpful. If you've got pets, encourage children to play with them and get confident playing with animals and to look after them. And if you're caring, like if you're teaching caring and you want to look after them, then you can encourage looking after themselves. You can, it's encouraging caring behavior. But it's, I think, if you have things that help you with your anxiety, try them with the young people in your life. Obviously, if wine drinking is your thing, maybe not that. I was going to say, like,
let's rephrase it. Try the healthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah, like
for anxiety.
We had for a while, we had a physical jar that you could write down if you had a worry, and you'd stick it in the jar. And then we'd sit there, and we would then, once a week, we would empty out the jar and we'd read them together. And then we could sit and talk about the worries and how have we got through it? Like, is it still there? And that was an outlet. It was a way of getting it out. Now we talk about things so openly that we don't have to worry about that because it's literally, we've already covered it. But it's open communication is key. But if you don't have fully open communication, just do what you can in the meantime. But yeah, if you are someone if your child is fine, but you're anxious, how are you going to look after yourself? Like, as a caregiver, as a parent, as anyone responsible, you always put others before yourself. And I think you really need to remind yourself that you are, it's valuable to take time, even if it's just having a really nice bath, or if it's taking a walk outside, or doing something you enjoy. If you love reading a book, put it on your diary that you're going to read a book for an hour. Like, I think everyone else gets to schedule in, children get play dates and parties and all these places to really let go, and they get to play their games, watch their films, all of that. You're not just there for looking after people purposes. Like, you are still a human. You're still you, and you deserve time to recharge. And I think like, everyone needs to remember that. Like, I'm awful for working until stupid o'clock in the morning, and then I will, when I'm incredibly tired, I will then get into bed and lay there at 3 o'clock scrolling on my phone because that's my time. Like, no, that's not my time. I could be sleeping, or I could have cut off 3 hours earlier and actually laid in bed and fallen asleep naturally. And it's not about grasping at time, it's scheduling it in, because you need to look after yourself. And because the last thing you want to do is get resentful.
Yes.
Because I know a lot of parents, like obviously we've just finished, there's big holidays, and you always see every time a summer holiday, a half term, anything, you'll see people walking in the shop, oh, I can't wait for you to go back to school, why be like this, why be like that, and it's so hectic, and I'm like, God, poor child is like, oh, I'm at home and mum doesn't even want me there, or and you need to really say, look, take time for you, because if not, you'll just become this power keg of everything, and then it comes out in probably, how it builds up and builds up, and it will take that one tiny inconvenience to tip you over the top, and then you
like
look like
not
an
being able to
absolute
find parking spaces.
Yeah. And then it will be the tiniest thing, you'll have weeks and weeks and weeks of build up, and then one tiny thing, and then you look like an absolute head case because you've blown at nothing, but it's not nothing. And yeah, it's hard saying it because everyone is different. Some people have really good self-care routines, and I am envious of that. I need to really pay attention. But yeah, it's learning. I'm learning it now. Like, I recently started reading again after a long time not reading, and I then powered through 2 novels in a weekend, and that was a bit much. But I sat there and thought, wow, an hour sitting down reading, and it was like I was in a different place. And it just took my brain away from everything. It was calming. I put some candles on. I was like, I feel so good right now.
I think the thing I kind of found with anxiety, as I've worked with anxiety for a long time. I had very bad anxiety and depression when my kids were small. I've spent probably the last 8 years learning and doing self-development to work with and through anxiety. And some of the really powerful things that helped me when I was anxious was, one, not feeling guilty for it.
Yeah.
Taking that guilt out of feeling not well was massive for me. Allowing it and recognizing and acknowledging it was huge. I spent so much time in a cycle of anxiety, and then I'd feel guilty because I hadn't done everything because I was anxious. And then I would feel anxious and depressed because I felt guilty, and literally went round in circles. I was drilling myself into the floor because, if I hadn't done the perfect self-care routine that I'd set out, then obviously I'd failed. And then obviously I have to beat myself up about it and get anxious because I'm not good at self-care, and I can go in that circle again.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most powerful things for me, was taking the guilt out of it. It was huge. And then it was also understanding that my self-care is so different to someone else's self-care. And my self-care today is so different from my self-care yesterday. And making space for it, I don't timetable it. I don't. I can't. I do timetables. Hard avoidance. If you tell me I have to do an hour of reading a book, I would sit for 5 hours and read it. I have no, and I understand this about myself. But my self-care changes. It's not set things, it's continuous.
Yeah.
While we're recording this podcast, I'm drinking water. That is self-care. I'm sitting here in a comfortable position, and that is self-care. And I think sometimes we make self-care into big things, and we miss the self-care that we are doing every single second of the day.
Yeah.
And with anxiety, it's about stopping beating ourselves up for needing that. And acknowledging when we are doing it and how we're doing it, because you wouldn't acknowledge that this was self-care right now. You'd be like, I'm working, this isn't self-care. But it is. I'm having a conversation with someone who has made me laugh ridiculous amounts today, and I have stomachache because of it. I'm drinking water, I'm comfortable, I'm not in a bad space. This is a moment of self-care. Why not? Why can't we fit it in like that? And the other way was mainly self-compassion. Having the compassion for, if things weren't going right, then that's okay. And taking that understanding and that lack of guilt over everything going wrong was huge. It took It took effort. I won't lie to you. Self-compassion took me a while, and
Yeah.
it's still an ongoing thing. I really struggle with it at some points. At some points, I still can't get there. But it was, anxiety isn't a bad thing.
No.
It is part of being human. It's our alarm system. It's our gut intuition. Its problem is it's still living with the dinosaurs. Its problem is that it's still the meerkat jumping up every time you turn a corner, and it can be
Yeah.
a little bit over enthusiastic.
Yes.
It's this over enthusiastic meerkat is pretty much how I see my anxiety. It's going, bouncing around somewhere and having a party, and it just doesn't want me to miss anything that I might be missing.
Yeah.
Because it's over enthusiastic doesn't mean that I have to always listen to it.
Yeah. So true.
And anxiety, sometimes we empower it a bit too much. Sometimes we can, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging it. It's there. Uh-oh. Woo! For anyone listening and not watching, Cherry's picture just went bye-bye and come back again.
I don't know what that was.
But yeah,
Glitch.
notice the small wins. And yes, if a self-care routine works for you, then all for it, go for it, fit it in as much as you can. But if you're like me, sometimes it's noticing the self-care things that we're already doing every day. Don't get me wrong, I do self-care things. I go away quite frequently on self-development weekends, like all year through. And when I first started doing that, I felt so bad that I was going away 6 or 7 times a year without the kids. I was like, oh, how could I go away that many times? But I used to explain to people it was my balance.
Yeah.
I was working so hard, and by taking that time out, which, my kids were fine. They were with their dad. They were perfectly fine and perfectly happy. And it's been going on so long now that it's part of life. They've grown up with me going away like that.
Yeah.
It's second nature for mum to go away. But they know how important that is to my mental health.
Yeah.
And, even now my 18-year-old, he is autistic, and he goes to me, when can I go away? I'm like, oh, talk about parent anxiety, try that one. But the point is, he sees that I go away to get my balance, to take time out for myself, and he's bringing that back into him.
Yeah.
And there's some really powerful teachings that he's taking from that.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't have ever been in the position I'm in now without taking that time for myself.
Yeah.
There's so many things.
There is. It's also very important to remember that don't feel bad if you are feeling anxious as a parent or a caregiver, because let's be honest, being responsible for small humans is terrifying. Like, I will tell you, like, whenever any of my friends have babies, I will write in a card, welcome to the most amazing and terrifying adventure you will ever go on. And that is what I tell people, being responsible for this, like, growth of a human to become a functioning human, there's a lot of responsibility. So you're going to be anxious. You're going to be anxious that they're not going to go into school and wallop someone with something, or they're going to come out and tell them your deepest, darkest secrets in the middle of assembly. Like, you can't control.
The amount of times that happened to me was ridiculous.
And that's nature, that it's what happens, but it is anxiety inducing, especially if you've got a child who does worries about going into school. And I know for a fact, my previous experiences, on the days when getting my daughter to school was easy, you'd get lulled into that false sense of security, and you'd be worried, is it now? Is she gonna flip? Is she whatever? And then the next day it'd come back and it'd start, and the anxiety was back. And it's that constant state of not knowing. So you need to have these little practices in place, even if it's breathing for 5 minutes, taking yourself out of the equation, just step away, have a sip of water, come back. You need to have things in place so you can also feel okay, because if not, you'll be a bubbling wreck otherwise, because you're just waiting for the bad. If you spend your entire time waiting for the bad, you're just going to miss the good, and it's just you're just going to sit there. And it's grand scheme of things, the bad passes, Of course it does. You know, we had on-off years, you know, it was a bad year, good year, bad year, good year, with, you know, every day it was hard going into school. And then it was amazing. And then you'd get really confident. And then the next year it come back and she can't go into school again because she's too scared. And you have to find that balance within yourself, and you have to find your coping mechanisms and know what works, and you power through, because in the end we can't give up because they need us. And it's finding a way to make it as manageable as possible for you in whatever aspect that means.
And if you are feeling this anxiety, then, you know, we're obviously going to say pop over to Dreamweavers and join one of our forums. Come and have a conversation with us. Come and join in one of the memberships. Come and talk to us monthly. You know, have a conversation about that anxiety and see what other parents are finding. But it's not just us in the world. We're not that silly. You know, we know that there are other support groups out there as well.
Absolutely.
Find some help out there. If you can't manage to find this on your own at the moment, that's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're in that space of anxiety and depression and overwhelmed with everything, finding help can be just another thing on top of the pile. You know, it can be so hard to reach out. It can be so tricky to, you know, I've known people who have took years to ask me to coach them, to help, because they don't know if they actually are ready to be helped at that point. You know, and that's okay. But if you need help, then please do reach out, and, you know, don't sit struggling in parental anxiety, because it might feel huge, and it is huge, but it is not the end of the story. There is so much more to life and parenting, you know. And I also want to add, to everyone who works with children in this world and has classrooms full of 30 and 20 children, I have been there. I know how anxiety inducing that is. It's not just caregivers that have it, it's also the teachers and, you know, the nursery workers and staff in care homes. The anxiety of looking after these little humans is huge.
Yeah.
You know, so please join in and find some self practices that work with you. Find something to help you. And there will be something in our boards. And if there isn't, then ask the question so we can come up with something, because we're more than happy to.
Yeah. There's no shame in asking for help or asking for, you know, that's what we're building here. We want to build a community of like-minded people who may be the same in one aspect, different in another. And it is a safe place to come and moan about it if you want to moan about it. Ask for help if you want to ask. You know,
turn up at one of the wine and wine evenings.
Absolutely.
That is just whining.
It is. But it's, you know, it's a place where it's just a group of like-minded people who want to vent, want to chat, want to share ideas. And it doesn't have to be anything that is there's no pressure. You know, join in if you like, mention something. If you had a really good day, you just want to share it, do it. We'd love to hear.
Oh yeah,
you know?
100%.
Absolutely.
Share the good and the bad. I think that's something that's really missing in today's world. We don't share the good and the bad.
Yeah.
We kind of think we should share everything good, or we think we should share everything bad. We don't tend to kind of balance that very well.
No.
But you know, when you're in a state of anxiety, like I said, the first thing is don't sit with the guilt. There's no reason to feel guilty over feeling what you're feeling. Delegate. How horrendous are parents at delegating?
I'm awful.
Delegate. Ask for help. Delegate it out. If you can't delegate it out, then if you financially can, hire some help. There is no shame in hiring help. I think one year I actually cleaned for a friend to earn some money on the side. I remember doing it when I was young, and it helped her, it helped me. It was a two-way street. It's, you know, ask for help and there will be someone there that will help you.
Don't be too proud.
Yeah, don't be too proud, and set realistic expectations. If you have 3 children under 6, your house is not going to be quiet. Simple as. So setting
and if it is, what are they doing?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, if it is, tell me, because I want to know. Because I want pictures of the mess they're making. But, you know, celebrate the small successes and put realistic expectations into your life. Teenagers, don't expect them to go from not communicating to open book with you. You know, they're their own people, their own methods, their own lives. They're not going to go there. They're simple as all you're going to do is cause stress.
Yeah.
And focus on the present moment. With anxiety, especially, it's really easy to catastrophize and kind of make something into something so big. And believe me, I still do this. You know, and it's reminding yourself that your thoughts are not real. You can't write the story. You just can't. There are too many different authors. You cannot write what's going to happen. Same as you can't go backwards and change what's already happened. You know, and that's one of the main things that I remember my counselor told me when I first dealt with anxiety was, you can't go backwards. No point in worrying over it too much. Can't change it. And then the story going forwards has about 7 or 8 authors at most times. So you can't write it because you don't know how everyone else is going to react.
Yeah.
So, you know, use the strategy of what's happening for you right now. You know, and if it, this is gonna be like the worst strategy ever shared, by the way. This is completely against all advice, but this is what works for me. I actually, because I catastrophize so much, it helps me to catastrophize. I kind of over exaggerate my catastrophizing. So, like, you know, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to get out of the car, fall flat on my face, scratch myself, and then I'm going to walk in and fall over in front of everybody. And I kind of make it into a story. So it's so unrealistic that it takes the pressure out of any situation. Because realistically, I thought of the worst that could possibly happen. So, because I couldn't stop, I struggled to stop my catastrophizing when I first worked with anxiety. So I exaggerated by catastrophizing, and it actually worked for me. Don't ever, like, don't think that's in any book. It's probably the most unscientific help advice I've ever given. But it worked for me, you know?
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I think, you know, you have to find what works for you, even if it's not what is recommended. If it works for you, it works for you.
That's the thing. That's why we're on here, isn't it? It's to share what works for us. It's not, you know, we're not sharing medical advice. We're not sharing anything like that. We're sharing what's worked for us and opening the space for everyone to explore what works for them.
Absolutely.
So I think we've probably talked ourselves out on this episode.
We have.
So we are going to finish up this episode. Thank you so much for everyone listening. Please like, subscribe, follow along, comment, everything else that I'm supposed to say and forget completely when we get to the end of these episodes. We're on episode 5, and it is a privilege that you are listening along. And thank you so much. And we will see you all soon. Come join in the conversation and the community. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Bye.